Psychology is the new firewall, where human insight trumps every trick. We're not hacking systems, we're hacking behaviors so you won't click. No complicated code, just tried and true brain science at play. Social engineering for good, the best defense is in your mind today.
Hello and welcome to Phishing for Answers, where the carrot beats the stick and we flip the script on the bad guys, turning humans from easy targets into the strongest line of defense.
The views and opinions expressed on this podcast belong solely to the hosts and guests and don't necessarily reflect those of their employers or sponsors. We're seasoned security professionals, but this is a conversation, not a custom consultation. Need specific guidance? Reach out to Joshua Crumbaugh directly.
Get ready. Phishing for Answers starts right now.
Hello and welcome to the second episode of season 2 of Phishing for Answers. Today we are joined with us by Rohit, and he is the CISO of Yext. Tell us a little bit about your journey and about yourself, man.
Absolutely. Thanks, Josh, for having me. And hi, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
My journey began, let's say, 15 years ago. And all this began with a capstone project I had in my Bachelor's of Science that had to do with manipulating of computer programs. I thought it was stupid back then. Why would anybody want to do that? Although here I am right now doing exactly that. But I think I was definitely deep into computers and programming and whatnot, but security wasn't. Or at least hacking part of security, let me just put it that way, because that's how I got in, was never a thing. At least I didn't think it was a thing. You can't really, manipulate or tamper with programs. And once I was done with my project, I found otherwise. And that, kind of gave me a sneak peek into what hackers and what bad things can happen, with a well-regarded programming structure and a computer system. So I figured, hey, this is fun. Let's actually go a little deeper and figure out what else I can do. Yeah. And then, one thing got to another. And then I figured, okay, maybe I should be on the bright side, not the dark side. And figured there are actually courses and, degrees that you could actually get in cybersecurity. So I applied for one and I got into cybersecurity degree, which focused on InfoSec back then and data security. And yeah, here I am after all these years, still kicking in with cyber. Never miss a day. Always keeps me on my toes. Love it every single moment.
Awesome. And it definitely keeps you on your toes. That's actually a great segue. AI is just changing things so quickly. From the policy that we have to have in place to the training that we have to have for our people. And there's so much more than that. It's changing how we do our jobs on a day-to-day. It's changing the tool landscape very quickly. What stands out to you about all of that? It's a big thing that we have to address, or it's going to run us over, right?
It absolutely will. I think we're seeing that now. It's just outpacing everything that we built and outpacing the things. I would say maybe the barriers of existence that we put in place. They don't no longer help us actually keep the bad things within the perimeter anymore. I mean, if you think about these waves of transformation, it happened before, and I think with AI. It's happening, but at the same time, it's happening at such a rapid pace. Yeah. It's transforming economies, not just and also giving aspects of weaponization to all the bad people out there. at a pace where it's we've never seen before. Let me just put it that way.
Oh yeah, I saw something that said that there was an 800% increase in phishing attacks in 2025. I mean, that's ridiculous. Um,
I was just going to say, speaking of numbers, that's a good point. I've heard from one of the industry leaders just the other day about the malware creation that's happening right now. It's roughly about 250K malware binaries that are actually coming out on every single day using the AI technology, and
wow.
how it could penetrate into the networks. Just think of the destruction it can cause.
Yeah. And yet the good guys are still dealing with AIs that say, I can't do that. That would be wrong. I do think we've got to figure that one out really quickly, because our AIs have got to be willing to let us do the things we need to do to keep up with this. Now, that being said,
Mhm.
I do see it right now outpacing the good guys, and it's always been that the bad guys are one step ahead, right? But I think AI is our first chance that we have to get ahead of them.
I don't disagree. I think so. I think it's just like any technology is a double-edged sword. Like AI is no exception to that. I think there's as much as good there's also bad. Like a knife in a thief's hand could be different versus a knife in doctor's hand. The same thing
Yeah.
is the case here also, right? I think I think one thing I've been, noticing of late is, yes, I think the bad guys definitely have an edge right now, just because of the way these things are accessible, or the platforms, how you can run the AI and accelerate that, and also create all bad things. But I think what they lack, I think this will take some time for the defenders, is the context of the environment itself. What your environment is, and I think what the backstory matters when you're trying to build defenses in place. And the whole cat and mouse game, I don't think will work out anymore. Just given, Mythos is a great example of that not working out anymore. Like the P1s that we used to focus on, like it doesn't matter. Even if it's a P4, it's as easily exploitable just as it would be a P1, because the exploit code is out there and you have the AI tools, just like we spoke about, the malware is coming out at
Yeah.
rapid pace. It's not going to stop it. But I think on our end, the defender side, I think we do have, we got to start using it, practically implementing that, without which it'll be very difficult to figure out, how is it that you're going to work out AI, or feed AI into the culture that you're building within the company. And more importantly, how does your tech landscape change with AI, coming in?
Yeah.
I think this would become a place where, without, like, you need a diamond to cut a diamond, right? The same thing with AI. Like, you need AI, you need the
You
rapid
do.
pace, you need the innovation, what AI provides you to defend against AI, based attacks. So
You
yeah,
do.
one way or the other, you have to you have to be in that.
Well, I think it's a couple of different areas. AI is making our detection and response better and quicker. But the other thing that I see is that we used to have to make this decision. Do I want more false negatives or false positives? And now the answer is obviously, well, I want more false positives. And the reason is because I can plug AI into it and let it deal with the noise and help me find those, incidents that I need to look at. So I think that it also changes things a little bit there too, because it allows us to, have that higher volume of alerts without it being something that, makes it to where we can't find the needle in the haystack, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. I think you bring up a very good point. I think the triage has been a pretty laborious process in the past, where, how do we identify false positives and true positives so you can work on the ones that you really care about. I think we're also moving away from that and getting into this moving from vulnerability management, at least the way I think about this, into more of a reachability management. It doesn't matter if you have a P1 out there. or a P0 or a P4 for that matter. Uh, is it applicable to your environment? Is it something that's reachable directly from the outside world based on the perimeters you've built out? Even I think the whole thing kind of comes down to the attack surface you have open, your business your business assets exposed to the outside world, and what can that do when you have tools like AI, where the damage gets significantly much bigger than how it used to be. And I think getting down, you're still going to have to prioritize things. We're still dealing with remediation from a human standpoint. We aren't there yet from an AI standpoint. Maybe we'll get there soon, but you still have to prioritize what
Yeah.
matters to the business. I think that's where you got to come down to the priority stack of things, and which is where, does this matter? Is this applicable? Is this reachable? Then yes, then let's move forward. If not, let them let's keep aside. But at the same time, even for that analysis, like you spoke about, you need AI to help with that. You need to bring additional factors, technical and business factors, build the context in, and then now try to figure out what the final output is, and then start working on them.
I agree. I think that same, business context that is so critical in making decisions around cybersecurity and prioritizing different things is one of those things that we've got to give to the AI as much as we've got to give it to our lowest level cybersecurity person. One thing that stood out to me, I guess later in my career, because early in my career, I had done all of these application penetration tests, and we had a lot of informational or low findings around user and client enumeration. And a lot of these were SaaS startups. And I realized later on, when I had a SaaS startup, that being able to enumerate somebody's client list is actually very sensitive data. And that should have been listed at least as a high in any of those reports. But it was that lack of context that had it in there as a low. So I think that that's another, part of the human element, is making sure that we're communicating from top to bottom.
I will point this out. That's a good point you bring up, Josh. I think the whole aspect of data, the sensitive data, has always been a first class citizen, no doubt. But I think the DLP aspect of data, the categorization, classification, enforcement, I think that is still not effective in most of the firms out there. Unless you're in an extremely heavily regulated space and you just have to do it. That's table stakes, maybe. But for most of the SaaS first companies and cloud first companies, you don't really have that as the fundamental measure.
Yeah.
That is becoming such a big problem with AI now, because the data, lack of data transformation is the underbelly of having an effective AI strategy implemented. Without that, it's very difficult for you to kind of see what kind of damage can that cause. It doesn't just have to be sensitive data exfil. It could be as simple as somebody trying to access some data that they're not supposed to, and now that amplification can happen. You do bad, that amplification happens. You do good, the same amplification happens. But the core element of amplification is there. So you got to be very careful on how you're treating the data, especially if you're in a place where the data is super important for you and your clients.
Absolutely. So pivoting a little bit, I see a lot of my peers who look at the human element as the weakest link. And I sort of really look at it as very differently. I see them as our greatest asset, our best endpoint detection, if you will. And so I have this whole social engineering for good project. But what the reason I bring it up is that I'm curious, and I like to ask every CISO, what's the biggest thing that you found to effectively drive culture change?
That's a good question. So I think culture comes in multiple forms, and I feel when I'm trying to, in my seat as a CISO and a security leader, the way I'm trying to think about this is, how can I embed security into the everyday flow of things? And it has to be something that's not on the dark corner. The security issue is not supposed to be like that. It has to be embedded in the very fabric of the culture itself. And I think there are a few things that I would usually employ. Like, first of all, I think, a lot of people jump to conclusions and figure out, okay, security training, awareness, do this, do that, and there are enforcements, or there are some kind of punitive things that you'll have to push in to get people going. I think it's kind of this hockey stickification. I feel maybe you'll get some benefit off the bat, but after that it's just going to get worse and worse, because you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
People are no different than you. So the mental terrain is the most difficult terrain out of all, right? So you got to be careful on how you deal with that. For something, and I'm not going to say I'm perfect at this, but I really like to think about this, as I've seen in multiple organizations in the past. First of all, diagnose the situation itself. Let's see how your users are they being rewarded for something? Are they being punished for something? How open are they about talking about security? Are they bringing up the reports proactively, or do you need to push them to get that going? And also, once they do that, how is the team responding back? Are you responding in a are you embarrassing them? Are you
I hope
taking
not.
this in a right? I hope not. Yeah. That is a sure shot for failure. So
It is.
I think once you get that going, you'll figure out, what kind of incentives you have built into the culture already, both personal incentives and also corporate incentives. And then you tie that into the motivations of the person or people itself.
Yes.
Like what kind of motivations they have, right? Everybody is working towards something, and nobody, in the corporate setting, at least most of them, they're not trying to do bad things. They're trying to do what they have to.
Preach
right?
it.
Preach it. And your social engineering for good exactly taps into that, I guess. You're talking about, hey, there's good everywhere we look. We just have to look deep enough. And when you look deep enough, you'll actually find this, their motivations. They want to keep themselves, they want to keep themselves safe, right? How do you do that? Be cyber smart, think about things and learn about things, and we can help you get there. I think that's number one. And second thing I found is also making security the easiest path.
Yes. When it's the easiest option, it's the default option.
It's the default option. You don't have to, go out and do something else. It's a part of your workflow. It's a part of how you do things. Like, from an engineering perspective, if you're making it easy for them to, validate the tainted input directly from the same library that they're working on, perfect. Like they don't have to go and investigate and, create a new library to bring that in. Yeah. The same thing applies for corporate too. Like, security awareness or trainings have to be part of the work that you're currently doing. If you're a finance person, you have a certain workflow. You got to diagnose that. If you're a HR person, you have a certain workflow. You come up and you come to the desk in the morning, you start working on something. What is that something? Let's figure that out. And now let's see how security can tap into that. I think that was one of the biggest things I found, where we could get better adoption in actually getting people both to listen about what security has to say and also tie that back into their motivations and outcomes they're looking to achieve.
So it's so interesting. You touched on so much of the, there's actually a behavioral science framework for behavior change. It was developed out of Stanford University's behavioral science laboratory by a guy named BJ Fogg, and it's B equals MAP. So B is behavior. That's whatever behavior you're looking to achieve. And it says, in order to achieve that, you need motivation plus ability plus prompting. And so motivation, you tap in, that's what you said, you make it personal for them. You connect it to their job, their family, their finances. You make it personal. Even their ego is another great motivator. Ability is just making it easy. Like you said, when it's, make it the easiest option. That's why I love passkeys, because finally we have something better than passwords, and it's easier for the users. And once you get over that initial learning curve, I don't know about you, but my users love it. So, but I digress. And then finally it says, okay, so you've got motivation plus ability. You still need prompting. You have to remind them about it constantly, because it's not their top priority. They're going to forget. And so you hit on so much of that. And I just had to bring it up. Have you ever heard of B equals
Like
map
that.
before? Or
I did. I did. I did. I did. I didn't
Awesome.
know the the detail around it. Thank you for explaining that. But I did hear about that acronym before.
Awesome. I mean, it's so applicable. To me, it's one of those things that, well, it's baked into social media. It's why it's
Hmm.
addictive.
Right.
It's actually a big thing that's used heavily in Silicon Valley. But no, I guess part of the reason that they bring it up is because I really think that it's one of those things we got to incorporate in cybersecurity. I feel like every
Oh
bit
yeah.
of the awareness training, maybe not every bit, that's an extreme statement. Too much of the training that we do is to check a box for PCI, HIPAA, whatever it happens to be. And it checks a box, but every study out there shows that it does nothing to make us more secure. In fact, there are a lot of,
Mhm.
there's quite a few academic studies. And I can link you to a few. I've got a few friends that have done them. But so they'll do a phishing against a group of phishing assessment against a large group of people. And then they will run the annual security awareness training, that 1 hour class where they go through an LMS module. And then they'll phish them again. And in every single instance, either they got no better or they actually got worse.
It's funny you said that. It's we used to have this back at one of the places I used to work for. It's not so much of security awareness, but we used to have the secure coding training session, which was half a day, and we used
Oh,
to
wow.
put people through that torture for half a day. And it's funny how desensitized they get by the end of the session itself. It's not making them better. It's actually making them like, we're hearing the same thing over and over and over again, which doesn't have any direct applicability to what they work on.
Yeah.
Like if that connection is lost, then technically it's no different than information trove out there without any linkage to
Yeah.
how you need to bring that in and put that into your respective workflows. It's a clear failure, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, I think we got to just fundamentally change how we approach it in general. I mean, we've got to approach it
Yeah.
to the user and how we drive that change. There's this thing called the forgetting curve, and basically it says that if we get our training out to an hour, that within 48 hours of that training being completed, we will have, or our users will have forgotten 98% of what they learned. And so I think, yeah, it checks a box, but it still is the reason that our our number one phrase in this industry, can you guess it?
Number one phrase. Let's see, the weakest link thing.
I mean, I would go with you can't patch stupid. That's the one I hear all the time.
That's funny. That's a nice one.
So I got to ask you, and I think I know what answer you're going to go with, but if you had to pick one and only one, would you go with carrot or would you go with stick?
Oh, absolutely, carrot, no doubt. And also, I'll point out one thing.
I've only had
Carrot.
one guest to go with stick, but
Just yes, I know. I was gonna kind of also like stick is. I feel like there are aspects where you get close to stick, especially when you have a time pressure or things that you just have to put this out of the door as soon as possible. You may have to do certain things that are outside of the carrot, but I've used deterrent instead of stick or enforcement. Deterrents are a better way, and this kind of taps back into everything we just spoke about, the motivations. What does corporate motivation look like, right? If you're trying to, rather than labeling something as security awareness, label it as maybe you're building great products, security should be a part of that. So I think that would become kind of this natural deterrent where you're pushing the message but not hard, and people kind of get it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I sort of see it now. I have an advertising and marketing degree. That was what I went to school for. So maybe it's coming out, but I really see our job is to be advertisers or marketers within the company for cybersecurity. What do advertisers do? They get you to pay attention to stuff you don't want to pay attention to until you like it and you want it. That's really what we need to do with cybersecurity. So I see a lot of overlap there, and so I think some of those tactics that they use should be applied over here. And I don't know,
Mhm.
just my 2 cents.
I think you're right. Everything we do, like even outside of user safety, we're also talking about product safety. We're talking about trust, customer trust and compliance and risk management. You name it. Like everything within cybersecurity comes with, where you need to have sufficient amount of influence built in, but also
Yeah.
you got to have the storytelling and the narratives built out. So you're kind of taking this more not as dry metric, but more as free flowing information that talks, that kind of hits at the fact where you're trying to do what's best for the company and trying to enable them move forward. But how do you bring that into a story?
Yeah.
And we're also constantly talking with the non-technical people too, right? Like how you got to make sense the technical terms, you got to translate them in the right form so they get it. They get that it's not lack of understanding. It's more about, can you pitch yourself up to a place where you're able to talk things in business terms and finally get to that business outcome you're looking for as a company, right? Not just for
Yeah.
cyber. Company doesn't exist, cyber doesn't. Like
Yeah.
so you got to figure. I think that's important to kind of carry that over your head.
Well, and I think it's also important to think about the message that we want to send, and really to spend time on distilling it down to its core.
Mm.
And I'll give you an example. For the longest time, it was think before you click. But that was what I thought. Distilling this whole thing down to its core. That was the best message. But then I realized, maybe the best message is trust your gut and to teach them about urgency and authority and things like that. And so I think it's constantly thinking about, how do we refine this message down? How do we
Mm.
make it non-technical? And how do we make it as simple as possible? Because to me, users appreciate brevity.
Right. Absolutely. Oh my God. Yes. Keep it
Yeah.
succinct. Keep it clear. Tied to some business outcome metric. It's so easily digestible. Otherwise, you're just complicating affairs.
Agreed. Okay, so we are running out of time here, but I've got to ask you your opinion. One of the policies that I still see constantly, I do a lot of public speaking, and every time I do it, I ask my audience, how many of you have a 3 strikes and you're out policy at work, where if you click on 3 phishing
Mm.
simulations, you get fired? I always get hands. Now, it's less hands these days than it used to be. In fact, and the last one, there was no one in there, but there was one lady that said, my husband's company does. Uh, she wouldn't tell me who he worked for, but she said it was a very large company. Um, I think the point is, we still see this all the time,
Mhm.
and even in this carrot versus stick battle, and I said I've only had one guest that called it out, but that's the guest that wrote most of the books on security awareness. So I don't know. I do still see a lot of stick in our industry. What do you think about the 3 strikes and you're out policy?
I, I think the phishing simulation is a good topic to kind of build out the whole sticks, the 3 strikes thing, and why that could have been something that we're still dealing with even in this day and age. I think it came about from a fact that no matter how much you try to drill about security awareness, first of all, you were not drilling it the right way. The approach was not right. The response that you had when people reached out to you about reporting or talking about, hey, this is what's happening, the response was never right. So I think we got to change that in ourselves first before we kind of blame the users about this. And we're also like, users are this is not their day job. Like we got to
No,
understand
it's
that
not.
their day job is something else. This is kind of on the ambient, side or more on the periphery. Like, you're trying to bring that in, but at the same time, like you got to be empathetic to what they're working on.
Yeah.
I think, with all that said, simulation has always been a bane of my existence. I never loved it. We have these requirements like, talking regulatory or contractual in some cases where, do you have phishing simulation? If you do, how often do you do that? What are the reports looking like? I'm like, that doesn't really give any kind of, we're not trying to really fix anything there. It's more check the box and move on kind of thing. By doing that, we were actually, we were the trust component of cybersecurity was getting really tarnished. And we do all this, and without the trust, there's no way we could actually build an effective program, no way we could, build good control set, because we're relying on people to actually get that done. We're the reporters. Somebody else is
Yeah.
actually doing it for us. So I think, that has always been a constant battle for me. The way I do it right now and the simulation part, we are not doing dedicated simulations per se, or I've never been a proponent of that. If it meets a bigger purpose, let's say a red teaming exercise for a ransomware event or a data exfiltration event, if a simulation has to be a part of that, just to make sure like what kind of kill chain are we trying to define and what kind of outcomes we're trying to get, maybe it makes sense, but also, in limited doses on how we do it. First of all, I think inundating people with all that, we are kind of missing the core message of what we're trying to accomplish itself with the phishing.
So I agree with everything you said. But I have a little bit different take on it, and I want to get your opinion. So,
Sure.
I have this theory of human virus definitions, if you will. And my opinion is that we can run phishing simulations to inoculate people, to help them see how authority is used, how urgency is used. But the problem has always been how phishing has been done. We exploit users. We see if they'll type in their credentials. We use inside information to trick them. Phishing attacks that are so real, anyone would fall for them, including the IT person that made it if they hadn't made it themselves, right? So those do nothing but get rid of trust. So I took a different approach where I tell the users I'm going to phish them. I tell them, I make it a game. If they click, they instantly know they click. They get instant feedback back to their inbox. We start off really easy and we increase the difficulty over time, making it to where we can actually build those immunities. One of the things that stood out to me was that for actually the last 3 years in a row, my number one chronic clicker, I've got close to or over 2 million users on the platform. But for the last 3 years in a row, 11 clicks is the record for the year. That's the user who clicked on the most phishing simulations. Now, has not been the same user. And what I found really interesting was that these users that needed 11 clicks to learn how to not stop clicking, they were one of my more secure users in those follow-up years after that happened. So I believe that we can build immunities, but it has to be done right, and it has to be done in a healthy manner. Otherwise, like you said, all we're doing is abusing trust with our users.
I don't disagree with that. I think there are multiple ways to approach this, and what you're doing, it's very interesting. One thing I'm also looking for, and this kind of goes back to the operational resilience we're trying to build. Like, what does this security team do? What's our job? Like, to build that resiliency into the fabric and build the right control set, right? So that the soft center is being protected. I think, relying too much on the users is also not the right thing. Like, you got to figure out like the technical controls, like even if they fall, the worst case scenario, like, are you still resilient enough? That's something we've been focused on a whole lot more, because it's all about prioritization. Do we need to do like more user training or user handholding, or do we focus on something else? For us, it's like, it's clear that let's focus on something else, because that's going to be a long-term value. At the same time, we're building this safety net, so to speak. If they fall, that's fine. But we'll still train them. Incremental value happens. But are we protected as a company? Are we doing everything we can from our perspective to build the right level of controls? This could be enterprise controls, product controls, you name it. But I think that's also important.
Oh, I agree. I think that system hardening is one of those things that we don't do enough. I go into so many different environments where I start looking around and the GPO is lacking. We don't have any centralized sort of hardening systems or configuration management. We don't have images that were, or baselines that our vulnerability scanners are testing against. To me, all of those things are just as critical or more critical than the human, because if we do our job right, the human can make the occasional mistake, and it's not the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well said.
So, well, hey, this has been a phenomenal episode. Thank you so much. Any sort of final tips before we end the show?
No, first of all, thank you, Josh. This has been amazing. And thank you for all the amazing questions. And I think I've also kind of, opened up a trove of things that I haven't really thought about in a long time. So thank you for that. I think
same. I learned a lot here. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last thing is, we spoke about culture. I want to maybe put one thing in there. I don't know where this phrase came from, but, somebody said that, culture is all about people, doing what they're supposed to when nobody's watching them. I think that's such an important and a critical statement to think about. If you really want to have maybe good key performance indicators about how people are doing, I think you really got to diagnose the situation a little bit more and figure out what is it that is driving people forward and how does security come into that. And I think once you figure that out, it's very easy for you to see what adoption you're actually getting. And ultimately, you're actually making, your company a better place to work at. So that's one thing I wanted to call out.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think that's great advice. In fact, I'm probably going to have you back on the show because I've got a lot more questions that I want to ask you, but we are out of time. Thank you so much. You have a great day. And well, that's the show. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Bye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.